Hi viewers, so this is Dr. Ask. Today I am going to teach the lesson Ode to Autumn. Ode to Autumn is a poem written by John Keats. John Keats is said to be the youngest poet of all the romantic poets in English literature, and he was born in the year 1795 and died in the year 1821. Along with John Keats, there are plenty of romantic poets in English literature, and he belongs to the last decade of the 18th and the beginning decades of 19th century. And John Keats, if we look at John Keats' biography, and he was well known as the poet of 19th century, and who was very much popular as the poet of beauty. When we look at the other romantic poets in English literature, like Wordsworth, Lord Byron, and Tennyson, Browning, Shelley, and most of the romantic poets were confined with the nature only. And whereas Wordsworth is considered to be the poet of nature, and John Keats is considered to be the poet of beauty. And Ode to Autumn is also written with the sense of five senses here that John Keats has composed this poem. And when we look at the poem has been written in the three stanzas, and each stanza consists of 11 lines, but all the three stanzas were not written in the same rhymic meters. They were written in odd sense here. And when you look at the title's meaning, Ode to Autumn, what is ode? Ode is a song sung towards something, or ode is something praising towards the nature here. So John Keats had chosen this particular autumn season here to sing a song towards the nature here, because, and as we all know that season is a part of nature, and if we look at all the seasons, there are 4 seasons here, and autumn is one of them. And when we look at the cycling process of all the seasons in the nature, and the spring takes the first place, where we find the beauty of nature, and the next followed by summer season, and where we find all the fruits and the flowers, and where the nature has been flourished also. And the next season falls actually the autumn season, and the autumn season is considered to be a kind of ugly, that where we don't find the beauty of nature. And it is very interesting to see that why John Keats had chosen this particular theme to compose within the 3 stanzas here. When we look at his the other works in English literature, there are plenty of poems which have been very formular, and Ode to Nightingale, Ode on Grecian Urn, and La Belle Dame sans Merci, and these are some of the best writings from his pen. And when we look at the romantic poetry, or the romanticism, or the literary background of this poem, and in fact the romantic period was started in the year 1798 with the publication of lyrical ballads written by 2 famous poets in English literature. One is Wordsworth and the other one is Coleridge. And as history tells us that the romantic period started in the year 1798, where the nature has been brought back to in the works of art here. And when we look at the poem here, the poem is generally known as the senses of beauty here. The poet has come out with the beautiful publication with all the 5 senses have been covered in this 3 stanzas here. And when we look at each stanza, and each stanza has got its own uniqueness here. The first stanza tells about the beauty and the bounty of autumn season. As soon as we look at the first 2 or 3 lines of the first stanza, and we come across that the poet has addressed it to autumn season, and as soon as he addressed the autumn, immediately he jumps to personify the autumn season, and he brings out the theme of friendliness between autumn season and the sun here. So in addition to this, we find the bounty of autumn season, where we find all wines of the full of grapes, and the apple ripeness, and the gourd fill, and the hazel sweet nuts, and the kernels, and finally even the summer bees also, which are trying to eat the honey from the late flowers. So that is actually in brief what the first stanza tells about. When we look at the second stanza is very interesting, where John Keats has brought out the personification of autumn season. And here, how the autumn season has been personified is a very interesting thing for all of us. So when we read the poem carefully, here John Keats depicts it as certain very typical senses of autumn here, because autumn is personified as a woman first, and there are four personifications used by the poet. One is the gleaner, and the winnower, and the cider presser, and the maker of the juice here. So when he brings out these personifications, and it is really trancing actually for all the readers how John Keats has been called the poet of beauty here. So the first and second stanzas absolutely deal with the visual effects of nature, especially in autumn season. And when we look at the third stanza in brief, it is quite contrasting to the other two stanzas here, because the first and second stanzas deal with the visual effect, and where he talks about the first three senses like the taste, the smell, and even the touch also. But whereas the third stanza, he comes out with the beautiful theme of the sense of hearing, that is the sense of sound here, that is audio effects in the third stanza. So here John Keats talks about the music of autumn season. It's quite interesting to see along, because generally we all believe that spring season is considered to be the music season, but all of a sudden John Keats comes out with the beautiful saying that even autumn also has got its own music, and it is very interesting to see where the music is found in the nature. Because when we read all the lines of these 11 lines in the third stanza, we hear a lot of sounds in the nature, and among these, poet has mentioned few sounds here. One is the quail of gnats here, and the bleating of lambs, and the songs of cricket, and the whistles of redbreast, and finally the twittering sounds of these little swallows, which make a beautiful sound in the sense of the poet here. So these are the glimpses of the three stanzas, how John Keats has composed this poem to bring out the beauty of five senses in this poem here. So let me have a look at this particular poem, that how John Keats has composed this first stanza. Okay, now we look at the poem and between the lines here. When we see the first stanza, and as I already told you that it deals with the beauty and the bounty of autumn season, where he speaks about the vines of full of grapes, and the apple ripe, and the goats, and the hazel sweet nuts, and the bees which look for sweet honey in the late summer season here. And let me come out with the first two lines here. And season of mist and the mellow fruitfulness, close bosom friend of the maturing sun here. So the moment the poet begins the poem, after having introduced autumn in the very first line here, and he brings out the sun as the close friend to autumn season here. So what happens between autumn and the sun is very important for us now, because the previous season where we find that summer season, and in the late summer season we believe that all the fruits will be ripened definitely due to the temperature of the sun, and that's why in the nature the sun and the autumn season both are compared to be the close bosom friends. And there is one more very interesting word here, you see that conspiring him. What is the meaning of this conspiring? That and conspiring is it is a gerund used by the poet. Conspiring is a word which is gerund derived from the word noun form conspiracy. So conspiracy means something secret plan which is being made between two people very secretly. So that's why some kind of secrecy has taken place between autumn and the sun here, because nobody can see what happens to the nature definitely, because it all happens only conspiracy. Because when we find the fruit from the greenish to the yellowish, because you and I cannot see how the fruit gets ripened suddenly one fine morning from that greenish to yellowish. That's why this is called a conspiracy between autumn and the sun here. But as far as the nature is concerned, not only the sun here, even the air and the temperature, everything includes in the development of this nature or in the cycling process of this nature here. Most of the poem and most of the lines in the first stanza deal with the nature's beauty, especially the fruits and the flowers here. And all the trees which are having lot of weight here, because when we find the trees are bent or when we find the trees are bent down, it is not because of the air, but it is because of the weight of the fruits here that we find only in the beginning or in the early days of the autumn season here. And that's why it is mentioned here that to bend with apples here, because as far as the apple trees are concerned, we may not come across in this particular area, but when we go to Himachal Pradesh or when we go to Kashmir, we find definitely the apple trees, and all the apple trees look like, if you see the slide, all the trees having number of fruits. So that's why the trees are bending down to the earth here. So to fill fruit with ripeness at the core, that means now the fruits are ready to eat, because we all believe that especially in this geographical conditions, most of the fruits we prefer to eat only in summer season, especially the mangoes. So in these conditions, now all the fruits are ready for eating. That's why the poet has used the one word, that is mellow fruitfulness. Mellow fruitfulness means very tasty and yummy. And to swell the gourd and plump the hazel shells. Shells means here the nuts, and that is what do we find in the nuts? We find the kernel. What kind of a kernel it is mentioned by John Keats? He mentions that kernel is very sweet here. And still more, the later flowers for the bees. That means after the entrance of this autumn season, definitely all the leaves will be shedding their leaves, and all the trees will be shedding their leaves, and all the flowers will be losing, the entire greenery will be lost, and the nature is also going to lose its beauty in the autumn season. That's why the poet uses the later flowers here. The later flowers means, and we could imagine or we could experience the complete flowering or the complete greenery only in the summer season. But since we are talking about the beginning of the autumn season, in the beginning of autumn season we find all the fruits and all the flowers which are left in the summer season here. And still more, later flowers for the bees until they think that warm days will never cease. So where are these bees now? And the bees are hidden somewhere, because they cannot bear or they cannot tolerate the temperature of the summer season. That's why they are hidden within the flowers. They are hidden somewhere, they're covered somewhere in the flowers. So they believe that summer days will never end. That's why they are always there only, and they believe that autumn season has not come still. But as far as John Keats is concerned here, and he says that some are overbrimmed with their clammy cells. Clammy cells means here all the nuts and all the things which have been covered, where the little bees are covered because of the temperatures. So that is the end of the first stanza, where John Keats has brought out the beauty of nature and the bounty of autumn season, where we find a lot of treasure. When we look at the second stanza, as I already told you, that second stanza deals with the personification of autumn season and its activities here. So what is the personification used by John Keats in this poem? And he begins with the first line here, that who has not seen, and who has not seen thee after amidst thy store. Here th with thy means that is your. And who is that your? And here that who and your both are connected in the name of personification. And finally we come out that it is nothing but a woman, because sometimes whoever seeks abroad may find thee sitting careless on the granary floor. What is the granary here? Because it is nothing but a harvesting season. In this harvesting season, all the farmers, they go to the fields and they crop and they reap, and so in this context, the autumn season is considered to be just like a woman who is sitting very carelessly on the granary now. But what is she doing now? Autumn season is also considered as dye hair here. Who's here? The woman's hair. The woman who is sitting on the granary. And if she has loose hair here, and once that air comes, and the hair keeps flowing like this, just like the tides on the ocean. So in that way, the woman is sitting and the woman is personified there. But what are the activities John Keats has used about autumn season in this stanza is very quite interesting to see here, because it is mentioned that winnowing process first. What is the winnowing? That generally the farmers, when they go to the fields at the time of harvesting, but today we have all kinds of machinery, and so that we can separate the grain from the dust without any hard work. But even today also, if you go to a few villages, we find the separation of this paddy or the separation of all type of grams, and in a very natural sense only, because they do certain things like this, and they stand on the top of something else and they start pouring from the bowl. So when they pour from the bowl, and the grain falls directly just like a heap, and the dust keeps going away. So that dust which is moving away is called just like a woman's hair which is being lifted in the air. So that is really fantastic reference used by John Keats here. And one more thing is, drowsed with the fume of poppies, while thy hook spares the next swath and all its twined flowers here. You see here that one more thing, that the poppies are mentioned here. What are the poppies here? The poppies are some kind, happens that these poppies will give some kind of a drowsiness to the people in those days. So the woman's condition is depicted by the poet here as if she is induced with some kind of a wine, and that is very interesting. And half reaped furrows sound sleep here. Next spares the next swath and the folded swine flowers, sometimes like a gleaner. Who is the gleaner here? And gleaner is also a kind of a noun form, and generally in those days, after the harvest season is over, then we find some leftover material in the fields. So the people sometimes who go in search of this leftover material, and they collect all this material and they keep on their head and they move crossing the rivers and the brooks sometimes here. And so the poet has taken the word as a gleaner. Thou dost keep steady thy laden head across a brook. The word is used by the poet here, brook. What is a brook? A small canal or a small river where we find the way to cross it, that is called the brook. Cider press. What is a cider press here? Cider is some kind of a juice. What kind of a juice is it? It is a juice which is made of apples actually, because what kind of fruits we find at the end of summer season, and almost all the fruits are ripened stage. It means almost in the rotten stage. Kind of a mission. It's a very natural mission. Sometimes we find even the lemon juice also. How do we press the lemon? And we have a small kind of an instrument. We put that lemon, half lemon, and we press it, and we find the drops of lemon from the bottom. So now this autumn season is considered to be observed as onlooker. Onlooker means as an observer, that who is observing how the season has ended and how the season has started here. So yes, here autumn season is given a lot of significance in this context, because she has been watching with a lot of patience and tolerance. That is the end of the summer season here. That is why it is mentioned at the last sentence, hours by hours here. Not does not mean exactly hours here. It is the days, it is the weeks, and it is even the months also, because the season does not mean only a week or a day or a month. So it means even the months also. So autumn season has been waiting with a lot of patience with for the entrance of this autumn season. Well, now we look at the third stanza. In the third stanza, as I already told you, that John Keats talks about the music of autumn season. It is very interesting to see that how the autumn season produces music in this context. Because as we all know, spring season is meant for the music and the beauty and for everything. But whereas autumn season, John Keats has come out with the music that is audio effect in this stanza here. If we look at the first two lines here, he questions autumn season that where are the songs of spring? Hey, where are they? Think not of them, thou hast thy music too. So he is trying to console autumn season here, because we all know that autumn season doesn't produce any kind of music, and it doesn't have any music sense also. But poet John Keats was trying to impress autumn season here, because spring is very much popular with the music, because we find all the birds, we find all the animals make a beautiful noise and the melodious music also, just like nightingale and the other birds and animals. So in the same way, John Keats is trying to console this autumn season by saying that even autumn season you also have your own music too. But in how? It is very interesting to see which animals and which birds make sound and the noise, because music does not mean some kind of melody, music does not mean some kind of romance, music does not mean something which is very audible to the ears or catering to the ears. And here, uh, while bare clouds bloom, the soft dying day. So, without mentioning the sunset, because sunset means end. What is end here? End of summer season and the end of spring season, the beginning of autumn season here. So, without referring the word, without using the word sunset, he uses the word as the soft dying day and touch the subtle plains with the rosy hue. Then in wailful quail, the small gnats moan. Gnats. Here, G is silent here. That is gnats, and they keep mourning in a wailful. Two words are very interesting. One is wailful, and the other one is mourn. And both have the some kind of melancholy here. That it is a kind of a sad music. So, autumn season also has its own music here in the sense of all the birds and animals here. But let us find out which are the birds and animals which produce such melodious music in autumn season here. Then in wailful quail, the small gnats mourn. Here, wailful and the mourn, both words are very peculiar here, and they have been personified with the sound of this melancholy music here. Among the river swallows, borne aloft or sinking as the light wind leaves or dies, and full-grown lambs loud bleat, hilly bound, hedge crickets sing, and now to the treble soft, the red-breast whistles from the garden soft, and gathering swallows twitter in the skies here. So at the end of this poem, we find certain birds and animals which produce music, and it is a kind of consolation to autumn season here by John Keats. So the birds which I mentioned here, the choir of gnats and the bleating of the lambs and the songs of the cricket and the whistles of these red-breasted birds, and finally the gathering swallows. That means all the little swallows we find in the sky, they gather in one place and they keep twittering or they keep shouting and singing the songs. Even that sense of music is also considered to be melodious by John Keats here. So in this way, when we find when we sum up all the three stanzas here, and John Keats has been vividly picturizing the beauty of the bounty of nature, the autumn season especially in the first stanza, and the activities and the personification of autumn in the second stanza, and finally, and he talks about the music of autumn season and in the last stanza.